Hello, and welcome back to Call Your Coven. My name is Meg Jones-Wall. My pronouns are she, they, and I am the resident tarot reader here at the Coven. And this month, we're going to be talking about an evergreen topic, but one that I think is going to become increasingly relevant over the next couple of months and years, and that is collective readings. Now, if you spend any time at all on the internet, or if you're a regular listener of Call Your Coven, you may have heard the expression collective readings, as in collective tarot readings, collective astrology readings, collective numerology readings, etc. Sometimes these are called readings for the collective or community readings, but you get the gist of what I'm saying here. These are readings, ones that are done with any number of different tools or modalities that are designed for the many. Sometimes this is for a specific group or for a subset within that group, or sometimes they're just explained as readings for anyone who may hear them or read them or find them. And so I thought that this month it would be really useful to talk critically about what collective readings are, how they work, when they're useful, and how you can use them in a way that is supportive. Now, obviously, with the election results and the world that we are looking at, I think that we are going to see an increase in collective readings over the next months and years. I don't necessarily have any real basis for that beyond my own intuition, but it's just something that I feel we're going to see more of. I think that when times are stressful, I think that when people are afraid, I think that when systems feel like they are not supporting us, people look to other modalities and systems for support. And I really think that there's going to be an uptick in collective readings. So this feels really relevant to talk about right now with the current economic and political climate that we are in. And also as we consider what is going to be happening and how we are going to be moving through the world in the months and years to come. So let's talk about collective readings. First, I just want to remind you that collective readings come in many forms. These can be weekly or monthly horoscopes that are broken down by rising signs. I think those can absolutely be considered collective readings. Similarly, so can pick a card that you might see on Instagram or on the internet, or taped readings on TikTok, YouTube, or even written out in places like Autostraddle, for example, which is where I wrote tarot scopes for almost 5 years. Numerology readings by life path or yearly cycle number could also really fit into this category. And of course, beyond the three modalities that we use regularly here at Call Your Coven, there's also really any other kind of divination tool or modality. Those can fit into reading for multiple people at once. Lots of, if this video comes up for you on your FYP, it's for you types of readings. Personally, on my TikTok feed, I see a lot of channeled readings. I also see a lot of tea leaf readings and omens, and a lot of these 8 signs should use caution in the coming week kind of readings. And of course, I see a ton of tarot on my feed, on my own FYP. No matter how many times I reset my feed, these types of readings tend to find me with a very, on a very regular basis. Now, the forecasts that we offer in our monthly episodes here at Call Your Coven technically do fit into this category of collective readings as well, because I'm not pulling cards for you specifically, and we're not looking at the astrological or numerological charts of just one person and making predictions or recommendations for just one person and letting you all listen in, right? We're doing this for the collective, for everyone who may listen. When I do a personal client tarot reading, I spend a lot of time talking to that person before I pull any cards at all. I talk to them about what's going on in their life and what their experience is with the tarot, what they're looking for from the cards and from this particular reading, what kinds of decks they prefer, if they've had a reading with me before or worked with me before. All kinds of other things, so that I can personalize that reading for them and make sure that they understand every step of the process and understand what's happening in the reading, right? That's a really important part of my work when I'm doing a one-on-one client reading. But with collective readings, we tend to skip a lot of that actually and get straight to the heart of the content of the reading itself, but in a much more generalized way. Here at Call Your Coven, we're often looking at the numbers and planets that are going to impact everyone in a given month. And although B and Gina often get pretty specific about what kinds of charts will be most affected, they're still considered collective readings because we're speaking to a group. I also then pull cards which are offering specific kinds of support and advice for a deliberate period of time. But again, not pulling cards for specific people. And while the planets and numbers in particular can definitely be measured and calculated in a kind of objective way, those calculations may still vary in their methodology and approach. And perhaps more importantly than that, the methods for interpretation that B and Gina use, as well as the conclusions that they reach, depend on the practitioner, right? As well as the modalities and systems that are being used and styles of readings. Now, while there are tons of different kinds of collective readings out there and available for you, I'm mostly going to be talking about tarot and tarot readings because that's where my own expertise and experience lie. But a lot of the general information that I'm going to give, as well as ways to navigate and process collective readings, is going to apply no matter what type of modality or tool the reader that you're finding is using. So, just to be super clear about that. Now, in my own practice, the pulling of cards itself for the collective isn't actually that much different than when I'm doing a general reading for myself or for someone else I know. Now, I can't speak for all readers. I'm just speaking for myself here of my own process. But when I'm preparing to do a general reading, whether it's collective or for myself, I think about who and what I'm reading for. I tend to clear my mind, take a few deep breaths, and then I like to shuffle while talking to the cards about what I'm reading for, only drawing when I'm ready shuffling. When I'm doing tarot readings for the Coven, I usually specify as I'm shuffling that I'm pulling cards for everyone who is going to listen to the episode. And I specifically ask for advice and information on the specific month I'm reading for. Plus, I always use the same spread, which gives it the same kind of structure, right? You're always going to get a theme card from me that's basically a collective vibe check, as well as two cards for advice, one that's truth and one that's a dare, right? Offering that internal check as well as an external call to action. And doing the readings like that in the same way every single month gives a certain kind of stability and foundational grounding to my practice, even though I'm reading for a different month every month, obviously, but also there might be slightly different listeners every month. Now, a lot of readers will do breakdowns by things like zodiacal sign or life path number and encourage listeners or viewers to just listen to the parts of the readings or the specific cards or, signs or recommendations or whatever that's most relevant for them. Now, this is what I did when I was writing my tarot scopes for Autostraddle. I would pull 12 cards at once and pull one for each of the 12 zodiacal signs. Now, personally, when I did these readings, I typically just told the deck what I was doing. And because I did it for years, I always felt like my deck understood me. Hope that makes sense. But yeah, I typically would just ask the deck for cards for the season in order and then pull all 12 cards in an orderly fashion. But some readers will absolutely pull cards for each sign one by one, adding the cards back in when they're finished reading and reshuffling the deck between every single zodiacal reading. It really just depends on the reader's preference. In my own readings, I don't tend to read predictively, especially not when I'm reading in a general sense for the collective. Now, some readers do, and that's also very legitimate. I just want to be clear. There's nothing wrong with reading predictively. Every single reader, whatever the tool they're using or modality they're focused on, is going to have their own preferences and core beliefs that guide those readings and really factor into how they're going to present the information that they're feeling coming forward and that they want to pass on. But in offering insights into the cards that come forward, personally, I tend to focus on what the listener is going to have control over. And I like to offer information on the vibe rather than trying to name specific happenings that could come up. To give you an example, I am much more likely to say something like, this month, some tough topics might come up in your relationship conversations. So when you're talking to people that you care about and are in relationship with, move and speak with care rather than necessarily always saying the first thing that pops into your head. Whereas someone different might look at the same set of cards and have the same message to share, but say language like, you're going to end up in a big argument with your romantic partner this month. So be careful because if you use your words too sharply, you guys are going to break up, right? Similar information, honestly, but being presented in a very different way. I do prefer to highlight agency in my readings rather than describing a situation that's going to happen regardless of what you do. The great thing about collective readings, whatever the modality or tool, is that they're usually general enough that you can find some nuggets of wisdom that are going to apply to you or some senses of advice that is going to help you. And this is part of why they're so popular. Because of the format, you have the opportunity to just opt out if you're not in a space for the reading, if the reader's style isn't really resonating with you, or if you're just not interested in what they're offering, right? On TikTok, it's just a swipe, and on other apps, it's just a click away. You can kind of just say, oh, no, thank you, I'm all set. Personally, I tend to find collective readings the most powerful when there are synchronicities. Because I have a robust tarot practice of my own, when the cards that I pull for myself and then cards that I see some of my favorite readers pull are aligned, it feels extra potent. And it really drives those messages home, reminding me of my own recent readings, pointing me in the right direction, and often encouraging me to go back and look at, my journal entries or my notes around those readings. And it kind of reinforces that message in a way that always makes me listen up and listen more closely. But collective readings can also be a challenge, right? Because if the reading is not specific for you or it doesn't feel engaging or useful, it can feel off-putting, or you can feel like you're not totally sure what to do with it. So with collective readings, it really is up to you to decide how much stock you want to put into a particular reading and also how many collective readings you're going to listen to. In this way, because of this, collective readings can have downsides, or at the very least can lend themselves to challenges that are really worth thinking about and being aware of when you're going to listen to collective readings. Especially if you are feeling stressed or scared, especially right now, it can be really easy to get caught up kind of in a loop with collective readings. A lot of people are desperate for reassurance now and sometimes always. And when you're feeling that way, when you're feeling really activated and things feel really intense, sometimes we find ourselves looking for messages from spirit or higher powers everywhere, right? As well as kind of frantically searching for a feeling of calm or control, or even just honestly looking for someone to tell us what to do or reassure us that things are going to be okay. As I mentioned at the top, a lot of people are going to be looking to spiritual tools and practices for support now more than ever. Even perhaps people who have moved away from those practices or been skeptical about them in the past. And because of that, plus because of the way that social media algorithms work, if you watch a handful of collective readings on sites like TikTok or YouTube, you're going to start to see more and more of them in your feed. And even if you don't, because again, I do think that we're going to see an uptick in these kinds of collective readings in the months and years to come, you might see them in a way that you haven't seen them before, or be seeing new types of collective readings that you haven't seen before. Now, what all this can mean, this kind of feedback loop or consuming a lot of readings one after the other, what it can mean is that instead of actually taking in the truth of the readings and really sitting back to process them, taking a break, figuring out what works for you and what really applies, and then actually using that advice in your real life, we can just end up becoming kind of consumers, right? Devouring every single reading we find, getting stuck in that kind of hungry consumptive process when we're always looking for another reading to clarify the last one. And sometimes that can start to get a little scary or really intense if it feels like you're just constantly searching for the next answer. If you watch a reading from someone and then feel like you need to go watch 10 more of their readings, it can be a lot, right? And if you're someone who finds yourself scrolling for hours without meaning to, like losing time on these sorts of apps, having a lot of collective readings in your feed ends up being this like engagement loop that you have trouble getting out of. And look, I'm saying all of this without judgment because I also lose hours just scrolling on TikTok. So we all have our coping mechanisms. We're all doing our best. But I think this is something to be really aware of, especially if you find yourself watching like 10 or 12 or 15 or 20 collective readings in a short period of time. It becomes really muddled and it's hard to know what to do with that information. Another thing to kind of keep in mind or be aware of that I see happening a lot, and I also predict might become more intense in the future, is that folks become kind of dependent on their readings, right? Which, to be clear, is very much a thing that can happen in a personal practice as well as when we're reading or listening to collective readings, right? We become afraid to kind of take action on our own without consulting the cards or pulling a chart for the day or calculating the numbers for the day, right? We feel like we have to refer back to our practice for every decision, every choice, every feeling, every hesitation. And it becomes this thing that becomes really central to our sense of self. Now, this is challenging enough in our personal life or in a personal practice, but especially if you're becoming dependent almost on a reader that you don't know, that can feel really intense and is also honestly kind of risky because you're then at the mercy and wisdom and interpretation and guidance of a content creator who might not even know you and someone who could disappear without warning, right? People lose their accounts or don't get on a regular posting schedule all the time. And I don't want you to feel like you're falling apart if someone whose readings you've really come to count on suddenly isn't available for the week or something, right? It's a really intense way to have a relationship with these modalities. And I think it can become unhealthy or really challenging or painful quite quickly. So, with all of those caveats and warnings in mind, how do we use collective readings thoughtfully and responsibly? Now, at the end of the day, your ability to understand and utilize collective readings really does actually require you, as the listener or the receiver of that reading, to be actively involved. So, if you only take one thing away from this episode, let it be this: collective readings in general require the receiver to utilize discernment. Now, this can mean a few different things. And the first really is just that you are not necessarily just a passive consumer when it comes to collective readings. You need to be opting in and making the choice for yourself to receive what is being offered. In other words, you need to be aware of what you're open to receiving when you choose to listen. Now, if you're not in a space to do that, or if you're on that side of TikTok where the readings just sort of start and the reader doesn't tell you what they're doing or invite you to the reading or ask for your consent, honestly, I recommend skipping those. Or at least if it feels like something that you really want but aren't in a space for, save it and let yourself listen to it in a moment when you can make the conscious, consensual decision to receive the information that's being offered to you. I also think it's really helpful, especially if you're someone who loves collective readings and wants to be using them regularly but with care, to check in with yourself and to really be aware of what it is you're looking for from these kinds of readings, as well as, because we all are, the things that you're particularly susceptible to or the things that feel extra activating for you, right? Marketing has taught us that people are much more likely to engage with something in terms of like an ad or an app if it activates fear or anger, which means that scary or intense readings, especially on like free things like social media and free platforms that anyone can access, those scary or intense readings tend to quickly gain more traction in algorithms. It's why CoStar is so popular. It's not because it's good astrology, it's because it's mean and it scares people and it makes them feel like they need to learn more. It activates that compulsive, well, what do I do? How do I fix this energy? And CoStar capitalizes on that really, really well. While a lot of readers are very well meaning and might not necessarily even realize that they're doing it, there are also absolutely going to be people who take advantage of the fact that fear and anger and frustration are motivating factors for engagement and use that energy to try to sell you shit. Okay. And again, I know I've said this a couple times already, but I think especially with this new incoming presidential administration here in the United States and with the impact it's going to have on the national and global economies, we are going to see an uptick again in spiritual scammers or readers who are far more interested in making money than they are in community care. It is important to think about what you actually find helpful in these kinds of collective readings, whether they're short ones, pick a card, whatever they are. And to also be aware of what your personal red flags are or what you find yourself getting sucked into quickly. What kinds of advice or support do you actually use? And what's just activating or frustrating or engaging? And just to give you an example from my own life, I am very susceptible to like money readings. Money, I'm a self-employed person, I'm a disabled person, I work for myself, and money is always a thing, right? I live in an expensive city and the economy is not particularly friendly to disabled people. So when I see a lot of readings on my feed or even just ads in general for like, here's how to make this amount of money or here's what the cards want you to know about money, I have learned that I have to just skip it because if I don't, I get sucked into an anxiety loop around how much money I'm making, how much I'm selling, if I'm doing a good enough job with my social media or my marketing or my networking. It's never helpful and it always leaves me feeling worse than when I started. It doesn't feel supportive for me. Again, that's not to say that there aren't business readers out there offering incredibly generous, supportive, and powerful business support using these modalities. That's not what I'm saying at all. But what I'm saying is that personally, I have to be very discerning about who I listen to. And that's going to lead me into my best possible advice as we wrap up this episode here. If you want to be thoughtful in how you approach your collective readings without getting caught up in a loop or becoming overly reliant on the readings, I really do recommend choosing a handful of practitioners that you really like and trust and honestly, limiting the majority of your readings to those people. Stay open to other readers. There are lots of incredible people out there, but personally, I think there's a huge difference for your nervous system between consistently tuning in to established practitioners and between like spending hours just watching every single, if this comes up on your FYP, it's for you reading that you see on TikTok, right? Those are just really different experiences. And the ways that you're able to utilize the information that you see in those readings is going to be really different. Finding a handful of readers whose work you trust, who's been in the field for a while, who you respect, who's not necessarily just always trying to sell you something, as well as whose readings give you the kinds of advice and support and encouragement and clarity that you personally are craving. I think that can be a lot more supportive over the long term than just getting lost in the algorithm. Now, obviously, I love and believe in the work that we do here at Call Your Coven. And if you've made it through this whole episode, I hope you do too. But we're certainly not the only folks out here using these modalities to offer support and advice for the collective. There are a lot of really incredible people out there. So, as you're listening, take note of which readers in your orbit that you found give you the types of information and the delivery of insights that really do help you. And also note which ones just activate your sense of urgency or panic or fear. Pay attention. After you see a collective reading, pause, put the phone down or close your computer for a minute and really actually check in with how you feel physically, spiritually, mentally, emotionally after listening to those readers. Do it after listening to Call Your Coven too. And give yourself permission when you note how you feel to prioritize the readers that give you readings that give you the kind of nourishment that you need right now. Now, this might change over time. Sometimes we find a reader and they just feel really good and supportive for a while, and then we start just to find our interest fading or find ourselves gravitating towards a different reader. And that's fine. It's very much okay. I think it's actually pretty normal. But really learning how to pay attention to your needs and your responses to those readings is going to help you navigate collective readings with more intention instead of just mindlessly consuming readings and not being able to really apply or even understand all that you're reading. Speaking of collective readings, our December 2024 podcast is going to be released very soon, so make sure you're on the lookout for that. And I would also love to tell you about a few tarot things that I am putting together right now that you might find extra supportive in this particularly dark, challenging moment of history. First, I am offering a tarot study card container that takes place in my Discord server. It starts on December 1st. Whether you are brand new to tarot or have been reading for years, these card containers, I've done a bunch of them. They're always really popular, but these card containers are such a great way to engage with tarot-friendly community, to explore the cards in a non-judgmental environment, and to create a daily ritual around tarot readings and journaling and reflection. December's container is called Remember Your Strength, and it's going to feature daily card pulls from me, lots of questions and journaling prompts that you can use, lively conversation in my Discord server, as well as weekly spreads that are all designed to help you reflect on 2024, celebrate your wins, acknowledge any grief or fears that you might have in preparing to move into the next year, and also really recognizing the strength that has carried you through. 2024 was an 8-year, it's a strength year, and so we're going to be talking about these cards often through the lens of strength as well as through your own experiences from 2024. I am also running a 6-week individual series that begins in January, and it's called Find Your Lantern. It uses tarot and a little bit of numerology, as well as journaling, and of course, tarot spreads, to help you begin to recognize what your intentions, goals, dreams, and hopes for 2025 are. And it's also going to introduce you to some different tools you can use to use tarot to support you along the way. Now, I created these two containers together, these two offerings together. And so if you'd like to do both, when you buy one on my website, you'll have the option to buy the other for 20% off. I'm going to include links to both in the show notes. And because you're still listening, and because I love when people listen all the way to the end, I will share a little secret, which is that I'm cooking up some very special new resources. One with B on tarot numerology, and one with Gina on creativity and creative magic. So be on the lookout for those, because we've got some announcements and more details coming soon. Thank you so much for being here. Please make sure you do all the things like subscribe, rate, and review us on YouTube and your favorite podcasting app. All of those things help our show grow, and they're totally free. If you're watching on YouTube, please feel free to leave a comment with your favorite collective readers or with any questions you have about this or anything tarot related. I'd love to chat with you. And if you love what you hear, if you love being part of Call Your Coven, sharing with a friend, and supporting us on Patreon are some of the most valuable ways to support the show and help us keep growing. You can find us at callyourcoven.com, at callyourcoven on Instagram, and you can also leave us a message at callyourcoven@gmail.com. Remember that me, B, and Gina are the coven, but so are you, and we'd love to connect with you, hear what you're thinking about, and learn more about how we can support you. Thank you again for listening. Be safe out there, and we'll see you soon.